Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar sponsored and presented by Thermosoft International Corp, entitled Electric Radiant Heating Systems for Wood Flooring. My name is Sharon Schaller, the Member Engagement Manager at NWFA, and I will serve as your moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, I always like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You should see a control panel on your screen in the upper right-hand corner. You are listening in using your computer's speaker system by default, and therefore the computer audio button is selected. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select phone call in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed. But be sure to enter your PIN number so you can properly participate in today's webinar. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the chat box, as some of you are already doing. That's in your control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, but I will be gathering them and addressing them during the Q&A session at the end of Thermosoft's presentation. And then, as usual, throughout this presentation, we ask a few poll questions to get your feedback and to make sure you're paying attention. Our first question I'm going to launch here momentarily is, what is your NWFA member business type? The options are contractor, inspector, distributor, manufacturer, and retailer. Please select the appropriate response and click Submit. If you do not see your business type option, simply text it to us in the chat box below. Looks like the majority of you have voted. I'm going to close that out and share those results with you. So it looks like 43% are inspectors, followed by 25% contractors, 20% manufacturers, 11% distributors, and 2% retailers. Thank you for participating in that poll. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar. Sergey Schlappentoch has been with Thermosoft for over 10 years. His experience in the floor heating industry while working there, and at that time he has planned, supported, and provided assistance to countless successful floor heating installations. His responsibilities include overseeing the technical support team and acts as the primary contact for the wood flooring industry. Sergey is active on the NWFA Radiant Heating Task Force and on the UL Safety Technical Panel. His #1 priority on any flooring heating project is to match the desired floor with the right heating system, installation method, control, and end-user education to ensure the heated floor can be enjoyed for a lifetime. So without further ado, we will hand over the presentation control to Sergey, and he will take control of the screen. Thank you, Sergey. Take it away. I'm going to, hold on, I have to unmute you. And there you go. And there's Sharon, a beautiful picture.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Sharon. I definitely appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come in and spend a little bit of time with us here to learn about some changes that are going to be coming up in the NWFA guidelines and how these systems can help with that. I don't know how many of you know, but the NWFA will be publishing some new guidelines, and the radiant heating section has been revamped for the upcoming guidelines. The new guidelines do allow the inclusion of electric heating systems that are not only embedded in the subfloor, so it's a bit of a change of what's going on going forward. It is something that we at Thermosoft have been using and installing for well over a decade, and we have quite a bit of experience with many types of installations. And without further ado, let's just jump in and take a look at some of the things that we'll be looking at. First, we're going to define what the radiant heating systems are, go over some factors that we need to consider when installing it, the different types of systems, just a quick, brief glance at all of the systems there, as well as how they're installed, and get to some Q&A. What is radiant heat? Radiant heat is the heat that is conducted or emitted directly from an energy source. And unlike conventional and convectional heating systems in the house, it's drawn to objects rather than circulating in the air and then heating the objects. Especially with radiant heating systems, they go from the heating system to the wood, which then gets pulled in by the person that's walking on it. Thermal comfort is a condition of mind that expresses satisfaction with thermal environment. That's actually, we pulled that out from an article that Brett Miller from the NWFA published in the October 2018 magazine. It is a very good article about radiant heat that I recommend everybody refer to or look at with questions. And what that means, what thermal comfort means, is it's not always a number, especially with wood floors. Our experience with heated wood floors is that the number that the floors feel like is significantly smaller than the number that's, the number of that the floors feel like is represented by a much smaller number on the thermostat. So people say that the floors, to put it into some numbers, feel like they're 80 degrees when they're in reality just 72, 73, 75. So it's something, the number doesn't always express the comfort. What are the types of radiant heating systems that are out there? There are electric radiant heating systems, as you can see displayed by all the electrical connections on the left, and there are hydronic heating systems that are displayed by all the pipes and plumbing on the right. What's the difference between the two types of systems? Well, the electric systems obviously run off of electricity. They can be installed under almost all types of flooring, as long as you mix the proper installation method with the proper system. They can be powered from existing sources depending on the size of the room, or they're using the regular power lines in the house rather than having to pull additional plumbing. The systems can come in the shape of a mat or a cable, and they can control independent zones. As a matter of fact, they're typically installed as independent zones, one per thermostat, with limitations based on square footage of what you can run off of a single thermostat. They're also very energy efficient because with electrical systems, almost all of the energy that is pulled into the heating system is converted into heat. Hydronic systems are based by heating water and then circulating that through some pipe. It can go under flooring for most types. There are some limitations depending on the installation. However, they can go under most types as well. They are powered by an external boiler and a pump, so you need those kind of equipment to be added to it. And the water is pumped through plastic tubes or other types of tubes, but most commonly it's plastic. In order to zone a hydronic system, you do also need to factor in that you're going to need some actuators or solenoids, whatever those specifiers will make, and the controls in each one that are additional to the main system itself. It is doable, but it does add an additional complexity to the system. For the purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on the electric systems. Sharon, we do want to run a poll to see how many have you installed wood floors with a radiant heating system, either electric or hydronic in the past?
I have that poll out there, so go ahead and vote. I'll wait for the majority of you to vote before I close that out, so just a few more seconds. I'll close it out and share it. So the majority, 55% said no, 45% said yes. So thanks for participating there.
That is actually quite a bit more than I than I expected. Can everybody see my screen? I've moved on to the next slide there, Sharon.
Yep, you're good.
All right. So a couple of things to consider when installing radiant heat. One of the biggest things, and this is kind of the bane of challenges that exist with wood flooring in general, is the humidity and the environment. Wood, first and foremost, whether you're using heating or not, should be matched to the conditions of the environment in which it will function. You don't want to put a wood that is extremely absorbent of moisture in an environment where the moisture is uncontrollable. Keep in mind that when you do have a heating system there, it will cause the wood to behave relative to the temperature of the floor. So what that means is that you want to make sure that the stability of the temperatures is what's going to give you your predictability of how that floor will behave and will limit any fluctuations. Your end user should be aware of how important it is to maintain and test humidity levels to ensure the success of that floor. In Brett's article in the magazine, he did specify certain species that would be best. Mesquite, black cherry, black walnut are very good for heated floors. You do want to avoid your hickories, your beeches, and your maples. And he did also publish a dimensional stability chart, which we pulled out and showed here, to show some of the better wood floors to use with the heating system. Refer to the article, and obviously always contact the NWFA for support if there are any questions. And make sure you reach out to the flooring manufacturers as well as your floor heating manufacturers for assistance in getting everything tied together for successful installation. The cut will also have a big impact on the floor. As we all know, wood is hygroscopic and anisotropic. I'm sorry, I can never pronounce that. What that means for those of you that aren't familiar with it is that the wood will absorb and release moisture relative to what it is in the surrounding areas. If there's more moisture if there's more humidity in the air than there is moisture content in the wood will absorb it and swell, and vice versa, to cause shrinkage if there's less humidity, and the wood is what lets that humidity off. The type of cut that you have of the flooring that you use will also have an impact on how it will expand and contract. Brett recommended to use more of a quarter sawn or a rift sawn for a more stable width than plain sawn or end grain. As you know, the engineered woods are more stable than solid woods. There are, though, expansions and contractions depending on the width of the plank. Engineered planks that are a bit wider will have the ability, as with any type of installation, regardless of whether the heat is there or not, to show gapping, and you want to control that by controlling your humidity. The heat will not help nor hurt that gapping. It will just be different to control based on what you have. The other recommendation that Brett pointed out is to make sure that the wear layer species is just as important as the full solid plank species. The wear layer species and the thickness as well as the cut of the lamina, the slices that are on the top layer of the engineered floor, they'll dictate on how well it does over the radiant heat. And as usual, you want to make sure that your moisture content and your relative humidity conditions are in proper alignment. One thing that you will see as a common factor with electric heating floor systems, the communication between the manufacturer with both the floor and the heating system manufacturer is important. You want to know that both the flooring and the system are compatible with each other, and that they're being installed with the correct method, and that all the guidelines are followed. So always check for recommendations and instructions on how to do certain things. We'll be coming back to that point over and over. There are many different types of heating systems, but they do work very well with wood. The efficiency of how wood conducts the heat, it is a bit of an insulator, but that means that it gives it time for that heat to penetrate through the wood and then release that heat. It takes time for that floor to absorb that heat, and it takes time for it to release it, so it doesn't just fluctuate very quickly. One thing that a lot of end users expect is that they turn on the floor and the floor is warm instantly. That is a big misconception, as well as something that needs to be they need to be educated on. You want to tell your end users when they're using the floor, slowly ramp up the heat and slowly ramp down the heat in order to give that wood time to absorb all of that. The floor itself is easily maintained once the heating system is in there. Most of the times the heating systems, especially electric ones, are just set it and forget it. And obviously you can personalize any type of floor on top of it. So it really doesn't, there is no limit of what you can put over a heating system. There are many different types of heating systems that are on the market. We'll go into the differences of all the systems that you see here a little bit later on in the presentation. This is just an overview of how many different types of systems in the electric space there are. We'll go into how to install the heating system and how to install the wood floor with the heating system. First, let's define how the heating system is, how the heating systems are installed, the electric ones. There are two types of systems, ones that are embedded, that means that they're covered by cement, and two, there are non-embedded systems, ones that are embedded, ones that are installed directly under the floor covering itself. Let's go over the embedded one first. The embedded system can be installed under floating or glue-down floors. It can also be installed under nail-down floors where you use sleepers or furring strips that run perpendicular to the directionality of the floor, and the heating system is installed in between them, and you embed the heating system in cement up to the height of those sleepers. One of the things that you want to make sure is that when you install the heating system, you need to install the heating systems, cover it with the cement, and allow the time to cure. And some of the big considerations that you do is that extra time for the project. You want to allow that for a successful project. You want to make sure you have the additional materials that you need, like the trowels, the straps to hold the cables down, the membranes that you need depending on the application, and in some cases the extra labor that's needed when doing this type of a system, because sometimes you need an extra set of hands. You will also, with any type of an embedded system where you have a cement involved, you need to account for that extra height of the cement for your transitions to be successful, and make sure you're using the right type of self-levelers, thin sets, or cements. Make sure that you're using the right sealers or densifiers, and make sure that they're properly rated to a compression strength of 3,000 psi. The systems that are not embedded, the ones that are directly under the floor type, can also be installed in a floating, glue-down, or nail-down method. The steps for the installation vary system to system, but they're typically installed right as you're installing the heating system, so there's really no delays there. There's also very minimal height added because you're using underlayments that you normally would if you need them, or you're using glues that you would already be using as well. Things to consider when you're installing a non-embedded system. Because the system is exposed during the process of when you're installing the floor, think hammering, nailing down, gluing down, and putting things in place, you want to take extra care to protect that system. You want to make sure that you talk to the manufacturer of the heating system to make sure that the installation method of the floor and the floor is matched to the system that's used. There are certain systems in the electric space on the market that look similar, but some are allowed to be glued, some have to be in cement. So you want to make sure that you properly check that the system is approved for the installation method. You also want to make sure that you adhere to the proper nailing schedule for any type of a floor that's being installed. So if you have 3 to 4 inch intervals for engineered, or 6 to 8 for plank flooring, etc., depending on the floor covering that's going down, and that the heating system can accommodate that type of nailing schedule, as well as make sure that the underlayment thickness is recommended by the flooring manufacturer to be appropriate, and all the appropriate requirements and technical specifications that come with that. We're going to go over some of the embedded systems at this point in time. So all the systems you see on your screen require some sort of a cement. The heating mesh or the heating mats can be covered with a cement completely. You can cover them with a self-leveler and then just float or glue your floor down on top of that. When you do that, again, make sure you're using the proper moisture and compression strength materials. Make sure that the subfloor, once the heating system is embedded, is completely approved for the installation and meets all the NWFA standards for a subfloor of that type. The heating cables positioned by straps or ties is the type of system that you're going to use when you're doing the sleepers. This is the system that you'll put your sleepers according to your nailing schedule, and then you'll run your cables up and down in that gap between the sleepers and float the cement up or self-leveler up to the top. The membranes are put down and you run the cables back and forth according to the configuration of the heating system. You do want to take care with membranes to make sure that the membrane allows for installation of wood floors above it. Not all membranes allow for a self-leveler over the top, and not all allow for a wood floor to be the finished floor covering because they work in conjunction with the rigidity of tile and stability of tile in order to function as that membrane. And there's also the fabric heating mats, which get that thin set in. You use a layer of thin set below and a layer of thin set above. The fabric heating mat is the one that I wanted to bring attention to because there is a non-embedded system that is also very similar looking but functions completely different. So you want to make sure that you contact the manufacturer and choose the appropriate system for your application. You will show up at times on a system that already has a radiant heating system poured into a concrete slab. It may be a self-regulating cable or a cable held down to the rebar. The biggest thing you want to take care of with this is knowing how deep the heating system is installed. So if you have to drill to measure the moisture content of that slab in preparation for your installation, you want to make sure that you don't damage the heating system. And again, the heating system manufacturer can guide you in the proper way of seeing where that is and how that works. There are systems that allow for nailing of your flooring down to the installation. Some have an underlayment attached, and some are the fabric mat, similar as the one that was for the cement looking. They are fundamentally different systems, so check with the manufacturer. You always want to make sure you adhere to the proper nailing schedule. And there are a couple of other systems that are low voltage as well that will require an additional transformer, but they do allow for systems to be nailed through. Depending on the type of a system that you're using, they will either have a specific place where you can nail, or they will have a nailing allowed in all places. That goes for all types of fasteners, mechanical fasteners, that is. There are systems that are approved for glue down installations. You want to make sure that the heating system has been paired or matched with the appropriate type of glue that's been approved. Some of the systems, these particular heating mats, the process to install these would be putting down a layer of glue on the floor, a thin layer. You would then put the heating system down on top of that glue layer, and the heating mat would then be covered up one more time with a second layer of glue, and you install your wood floor glued down exactly the way that you normally do this. This is the type of installation that is most commonly used with a wider type plank, as glue, as far as I'm aware, is the preferred method of installation for that. It's also the recommended method for any type of system that is installed directly under the floor, where you want to secure the floor down and avoid having to potentially damage the heating system with some sort of a mechanical fastener. When you're using a glue down system, you don't have a chance of actually nailing right through a heating wire or heating element in a spot where it's not approved. There are a lot of floating systems. There's actually 2 slides worth of floating systems that can be installed. Typically, you're going to be doing that with an engineered floating or engineered hardwood floor. Make sure that the systems that you're using are appropriately matched for all types of the flooring, subfloor, and moisture penetration that you need. Some systems are made out of a foil mat or a polymer film or a fabric that some breathe, some don't. So depending on your type of application, you want to make sure that the system is properly matched and responds accordingly with what you're expecting the conditions to be below, above, and around the system. We're going to have one more poll.
I'll go ahead and launch that. Would you use an electric heating system for your flooring project, yes or no? Wait just a few seconds to get the majority vote. Thank you all. I'll close that out and share it. And 77% said yes, 23% no. Thank you. Back to you, Sergi.
Well, those 23, I offer my expertise for you to contact me in order to allow me to change your mind, because the systems do work great. But the 77% that said yes, thank you for trying these systems. Or if you've used them, thank you for using them. Can you see my next screen, Sharon, just to confirm?
Yes,
okay.
We're good.
Some additional things that you want to make sure that you do when you install an electric system. With any type of a heating system that's installed under a floor, we strongly recommend the use of data loggers. Those data loggers will essentially give your floor a voice to tell you if they were used correctly. Every flooring manufacturer will have some sort of a restriction that either points back to the NWFA guideline, or they have something that they've specifically tested with a heating system to be the approved type of system or parameters of where the floor is run. And those are going to be restrictions on humidity as well as temperature, and this will record it and let you see later on if there is some sort of issue, what exactly caused it, and if it was user error setting the temperatures too high or changing the temperatures too quickly. Every electric floor heating system should be controlled by a thermostat. It's actually required, should be required for installations with the floor heating system. And the electric floor heating systems are fundamentally different because they include a floor sensor. The floor sensor is a little wire that's installed in the floor, and it tells the thermostat exactly the temperature of that floor, and it's installed in between the heating element, or as the floor heating manufacturer recommends according to their instructions. Those floor sensors allow you to have a very stable floor temperature, because you can set the thermostat to be a specific temperature and it'll keep it within that range. There are many thermostat options available. There are Wi-Fi, touchscreen, programmable, manual. The recommended operation is the manual thermostat. To have, even if you get a programmable thermostat, you put it into manual mode for your day-to-day use, going up and down on the temperature as you need, using the program to ramp that up and ramp that down. The common questions, some of the questions that we have are power source and consumption. Well, number one, you're already using an existing power source. So if you don't have a extra hot water boiler in the house for a hydronic system, with electric systems, you're using the electrical wiring that's in the house, or very easy to run additional wiring. That allows you to use these types of systems in almost every single remodel project. The average cost to run these systems is about half a penny per square foot per day. And when you have enough of a heating system in a building, you can reduce the entire building's heat load requirement by 25%. What that means is that the other heating systems can run significantly less to give you as much as a 40% energy savings off of your entire utility bill. Again, electric heating systems use almost 100% of the power to generate the heat. So they're extremely efficient, especially for green buildings. Some of the tools that you might want to add to your toolbox when you're doing these types of systems is a multimeter, continuity checker, and always keep an extra backup floor sensor on hand. You want to install 2 in every thermostat That way, in case one is either in the wrong place or it's going to go under a rug or one is damaged, you have a spare there. Things to do when you're choosing a system to fit your space. Number one, as always, measure the space. You always want to deduct the area that's under any type of an item like a flat bottom furniture that's planned to be there, or any fixtures that are going to be sitting directly on the floor like built-ins, to not be under the heating system. When you are choosing the heating system, take your subfloor into consideration, because some systems have to go from edge to edge, other systems can be installed in the middle. And the last one, consult with the floor heating manufacturer in order to choose the right system for your project. Spell out to them exactly what you want to do, and most manufacturers will have either a system that you can use or they'll say they don't. But you want to set yourself up for success depending on what that system is going to need, and you want to know exactly what that system, what's going to entail to install that particular system for that application. Some tips for successful installations: test and test again. What that means is every electrical heating system, when you get it, will have a specific set of readings that come with that particular heating mat or cable. And what you want to do is use your multimeter to test as you're doing the installation. If you happen to damage the heating system during the installation, you want to catch that before you have the entire floor down. So having a habit of testing it once an hour, so you can, which by the way only takes about 2 minutes to test the heating systems. If you get into the habit of testing it once an hour, you know what you've done in that last hour to fix if in case something broke before you finish your flooring. Maintain proper distance. Certain heating systems require you to space the cables properly or space the mats properly from each other, so you want to pay attention to that. You always want to make sure that you have that backup sensor for that thermostat installed into the floor itself. You want to use a plastic trowel if one is available for the appropriate settings if you're doing completely glue. Some metal trowels can get quite sharp, so a plastic one, if it's available, it will help protect that heating system a little bit more. And communication, again, is key. Communicate with the manufacturers and their representatives for help with choosing and guiding you with proper installation tips of these systems. At this point in time, I'll make myself available for any questions that are there.
So thank you, Sergi. That was excellent information. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. So as a reminder, just go to the chat box, enter your questions there, and we'll try to address them. We have quite a number of questions here, Sergi, but the first one comes from Don, and he says, would it be logical to assume that electric heat will be more equal on the floor as compared to hydronic systems that may have hot spots?
That's actually a fantastic question, Don. Electric heating systems actually have quite a bit of an advantage, especially around the spots that are going in and out of the doorways and manifolds compared to a hydronic system. With hydronic systems, you have pipes that go in and out where they converge into a single spot where you have a bit more density of that heat is concentrated more in certain spots. Whereas on all electric systems, if the instructions are followed correctly, the wires are spaced absolutely evenly, and they're only in the spot where the heating mat or cable is. With those types of systems, the lead wires that go up to the thermostat are actually cold, so they don't generate any type of heat. So you can have multiple lead wires running close to each other, but they won't generate any additional heat when you combine multiple mats together. And that way you do have a much even heat. The other benefit of an electric system is that a lot of the cables or heating elements are spaced significantly closer together. What that means is that the heat that's generated by those cables is actually significantly less per linear foot of cable or heating element than in the hydronic systems, which are typically spaced at 12 inches on center, and you have those hot spots every 12 inches. A lot of our systems are actually 3 inches or less on center, specifically designed to make that significantly more even heat.
Thank you. The next question comes from David. Please discuss your adhesive requirements for both electric mats and hydronic systems. Do you specify this, or do you leave it up to the adhesive manufacturer?
So with I'm going to leave the hydronic, David, I'm sorry, but I'm going to leave the hydronic portion of the adhesive separate away from for a separate conversation, since our focus here is electric, and I'm not that that much of an expert in the adhesives for the hydronic side of things. For the electric side of things, I'm going to use an example of a system that ThermoSoft has as one of our available products, which is WarmStep. We actually have multiple glue manufacturers testing this particular system for glue applications. And what they do is they test the glue to make sure that it creates that appropriate adhesion when installed as recommended, with a layer of glue below and above. And I can tell you that we haven't had a single manufacturer that we've tested it with on regular adhesives that they use that this has not passed. Part of the reason is because of how permeable that particular system is.
Okay. Next question from Rick. The thickness of the top wear layer make a difference over radiant heat?
Yes, the thickness of the top wear layer, as well as the cut of the top wear layer, will make a difference. But it's not necessarily specifically with radiant heat. It will make a difference on how it behaves in general. If you have the top wear layer, regardless of thickness, be a material that's not really approved for radiant, like Brett Miller from the NWFA pointed out for some of the maples or the hickories, you're going to potentially open yourself up for some trouble. However, again, the NWFA has a fantastic resource. We're going to hold off on answering a little bit of that until there's a bit more information that the guideline will produce, and I can definitely come back to you with a more detailed answer to that question when I reach out to Brett.
Okay, and John asks, strand bamboo and electric heat. Can you comment on that?
We have. I have to keep the companies out of the presentation for obvious reasons, because I don't want to endorse anybody in particular, but we do have bamboo manufacturers that we've worked with and have tested these systems with and have had no problems at all. Again, the challenge is keeping the stability and the end user properly educated to keep the humidity and stability of the temperatures that are set in the house and of the flooring itself in the right parameters of what the manufacturer recommends. The floor sensor that is installed with the heating systems, with every electric heating system, makes that significantly easier, because electric heating systems are controlled by measuring the temperature of the floor itself, not the room. A lot of interest in heating systems, or a lot of use of heating systems in the past, has been to generate heat for the entire room, and as such they're controlled by the room temperature. The programmable and the more advanced thermostats can actually limit the temperature of the floor while controlling the room, and it's something that the floor heating manufacturer can guide you in choosing the right one.
Okay, we have a question from Matt. Do you still recommend an outdoor thermostat to keep customers from heating rapidly? Is it part of your system?
Electric heating systems do not require an outdoor thermostat because they're not setting temperatures of water, which is controlled before it gets to the heating system. The electric floor thermostats measure the temperature of the floor itself directly, which is what allows you to have a simpler system that controls straight to that floor, right with that one control, without having to have any additional controls that need to speak with each other.
Okay, John asks, are area rugs a problem?
Area rugs are not recommended over heating systems if they are very thick. One thing that we do recommend is installing the floor sensor if an area rug is planned to be installed in an area. Put the floor sensor that is connected to the thermostat under where the area rug will be. It will actually tell the heating system to turn off as the temperature under the area rug reaches the upper limits of what are set, without heating those additional areas outside. It will cause the outside areas of the areas that are outside of that rug to run cooler, but it will protect the floor and provide a successful installation that way.
Okay. Neil asks, what types of adjustments would you have to make to a nail-down application work with one of these systems? If it's not embedded, is there anything you have to do differently?
So with embedded systems, you're looking at using the sleepers, which we've gone over in detail. Again, with this warm step type of the system of the one that we offer, you would plan on putting the heating system perpendicular to the directionality of the wood. That way, as you can see on this on the image to the top right of on your screen, you have very clearly defined lines of where that heating element is. And you would be nailing right in between those elements.
Mark asks, how is the data logger downloaded and who does it?
It depends on the data logger that you're using. The data loggers that I've had experience with use a Bluetooth connection to a cell phone or a computer. We've actually had customers do both, commercial customers do both, where they provided that data logger access to the homeowner, so the homeowner can actually monitor and set their temperatures and moisture content levels accordingly, as well as keep that just installed in the floor for the situations that there are an issue. A lot of these data loggers will have some sort of a battery life that will last quite a while. The ones that we work with are years, as a matter of fact, and even if a customer or the end user has access to it, the device itself still stores all the data, and if an inspector comes in to pull that data off, they can do that accordingly.
John wants to know, is RH control separate from these systems?
The relative humidity controls are done by the homeowner, by the HVAC contractor. In the case that certain areas that don't have a central air conditioning or a central HVAC system, you would need to add either a dehumidifier or a humidifier to the space as appropriate, and the heating system can't add any humidity or dehumidify a floor.
Mark asks, what's a floor sensor?
So a floor sensor is a thin wire that you install in with the floor itself, right above the right in the bottom layer of the flooring. They're about 1/4 of an inch thick, so it's a very simple route out path for it for where you want it to be installed. You install that floor sensor in the floor itself underneath the floor covering, and that sensor allows the thermostat to know exactly what the temperature of that flooring is, so it can control the heating system and the temperature of the floor directly.
Okay, now Stephen asks, do the heating systems have an alarm in use during installation that goes off should a wire be damaged?
Most manufacturers do have a monitor that will that is available from those manufacturers that can alert you in case that there's a system. We do offer something called an Instalarm that will do that, but it is a separate component that is available for some systems and different ones out there.
Jorge says, with an electric system, can I only, I believe it's heat, certain areas?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, yes. You can use electric heating systems under specific types of or specific zones in a specific area. You do want to make sure that you properly acclimate the temperatures or the flooring in general for the project to avoid those types of issues. But when you do a specific zone, there really isn't too much of an issue that is created by electric systems when you heat just in front of a specific spot or in front of a counter or under a table.
Michael wants to know, is a data logger mandatory?
A data logger is strongly recommended by the new NWFA guidelines. They will help you determine what component or application or usage of the system is at fault. However, they're not mandatory as following instructions is not mandatory.
Jorge asks, on a hydronic or electric, would it be safe to expect some significant movement on the first year?
Not in any experience that we've had. If the floors are properly acclimated, you shouldn't have any movement at all to begin with. And that goes the same for both types of systems. So the acclimation before you install your flooring is key.
He has a follow-up question by Jorge. Can the electric system be installed in any level of a home or building?
Yes, it can. It can go above, below, and on grade. You do have to obviously make sure that the flooring is properly matched for the level that you'll be installing it on.
Okay. Brian asks, when dealing with customers, what are some of the most common complaints that would lead to a visit regarding warranties? What is the most common installer and manufacturer issues that lead to failure?
The most common complaints are that the system is not heating up correctly or fast enough. And that is something that is done by design for an appropriately set up system in order to avoid any temperature shock of the floor. Proper education for the customer ahead of time is key for that one. The other questions, Sharon, would you mind repeating the follow-up portion of that?
It says, what is the most common installer and manufacturer issues that lead to failure?
The most common installer issues would be damaging the heating system during installation and not measuring and checking to make sure that that's not damaged during the install. These systems, again, are typically set it and forget it type systems. As far as the manufacturer portion of it, there really isn't any differences that a manufacturer can make for the system other than making sure that the materials are properly matched and the floors are properly acclimated by the installer when it gets on site.
Daniel wants to know, as a wood flooring contractor, are we allowed to legally install heating systems?
As a wood flooring contractor, you can definitely put the heating systems down as they are tested by UL for the installation application. You have to check with the floor heating system manufacturer to see if it's something that you have to do, if it's a system that's installed directly under the wood floor, or if it's something that has to be done by a cement contractor if it's going into a slab. The only part that, as a wood flooring contractor, that you shouldn't do is make the electrical connections. You want to work with a licensed certified electrician to actually guide you or make the electrical connections and help you plan the project ahead of time of where he can run the lead wires, where the thermostat will be placed, how those lead wires would be run to that location, and where he's going to get the power from. It's, again, going back to the communication portion of it, and that the project specifier needs to know that in addition to the heating system, you will need to have an electrician involved to make the final connections, and they should be involved earlier in the process than later in order to make things easier for yourself as a contractor.
Okay, Jeremy's question, can electric systems be fully installed by a flooring contractor? Oh, I'm sorry, you just answered that question, or does the electrical portion need to be done by an electrician? So,
very, very good question. I refer to my previous answer as the electrical part of it should be done by the electrician.
Okay. Jorge's question, he says he promises this is his last question.
Please, no, Jorge, they're fantastic questions.
What's the most common reason an inspector is to be called in on an electric or hydronic system?
The user. A lot of times the user will put something down that will trap heat, and then they will pick it up when the heating system, before the inspector shows up, and they will be very adamant that there was nothing there trapping the heat. The floor heating manufacturers have a lot of experience in working with these types of issues, and there are very interesting tricks that we have that will actually let you see exactly how the heat is spreading, how the heat is warming up, how the heat is cooling down, and how it's controlled. Also, the data logger will be a big help in letting you know that there was an overheating type situation when the temperatures were set a lot higher than they were supposed to. That's the second most common reason, is because the temperatures are set higher than they're supposed to, and then they're set down to the right temperature below that.
John wants to know, do these systems heat the entire area without support from standard HVAC?
It's a very good question, John. The answer to that is depends on the area, how much heating system there is, the insulation of everything else there. All of these systems are going to produce heat that goes into the room, and the heating system manufacturer, once you know what is going into this particular application, will be able to tell you how many BTUs of heat the systems are going to produce. If that's sufficient for the entire space, I can't answer that question, but I can speak from personal experience that during that latest cold snap that we had in Chicago, where the temperatures got into the -20s with a -50 wind chill, my personal home, where I have quite a bit of this heating system, was pretty much the primary source of heat for that time.
And Joe wants to know, do you have geographical recommendations for insulating your heating systems from slab?
There are recommendations for that, particularly if the slab itself is cold, but the question is whether the slab is insulated from the outside conditions. We do have insulations that we do recommend to put down on the slab if you want the heat to respond quicker. But with wood floors, you do want that slow warm up and that slow cool down process, and you want to have that thermal mass as much as possible in order for the temperature stability. So anytime you add insulation under a heating system, it will result in a quicker heat up. But if that quicker heat up is appropriate for your project, should be discussed when you have more details on that specific project.
Next question comes from Don. If a line gets damaged, can it be repaired, or must the entire section be removed and replaced?
That depends on the heating system that is being used. But in most systems that we carry, yes, it can be repaired.
Good to know. John asks, some homeowners set thermostats lower at night. Can they do that with these systems?
The different wood flooring manufacturers will have different requirements of what you can have as a fluctuation of the temperature of the floor. If the wood flooring manufacturer says you have, let's say, 7 degrees allowed fluctuation, then you can definitely set that floor back that 7 degrees. It all depends on the actual floor covering that's going to be installed.
A comment here from Don. He says, I just inspected one that was running too hot on the floor above 85 degrees, caused large gaps.
The new NWFA guidelines will have a guide for limits of what the temperature should be. I don't know exactly what those are yet, but I do know that they're in the low 80s, not high 80s. Experience from our customers says that the most comfortable temperatures of wood floors is in the high 70s, actually, before even getting to the 80s. So, Don, quick question. Would you have seen that issue if they kept the floor in the low 80s or high 70s? And the second question is, was this a system that was controlled appropriately with a thermostat set to control the floor temperature?
Okay, we have a question from David. Why would you want to drill into a slab to test for RH if there are hydronics or live currents down there?
You don't really. However, certain types of flooring or certain types of applications require you to do so. One of the tricks that we use is we use a thermal camera that will allow you to actually see the heating system as it's heating up, so you can mark where it's safe to drill. The other part of it to consider is the rebar that's in a lot of these slabs, that if it's a tension concrete, that you want to avoid hitting as well. The spacing in slab type systems is a bit more. They're typically 6 inches or 4 to 6 inches with an electric type heating system. So you do have more forgiveness in these types of systems if you do need to drill.
Don just replied to your questions to him about the 85 degrees. He said, I think not and no.
So no, it was not controlled correctly, and you don't think that there will be gaps. Thank you very much, Don, for that. It's a reassurance to know that when you're using the electric system correctly with the thermostat and the floor sensor combination, that we would avoid most issues.
We actually have one more question from Mark. It's not to do with your presentation, but he asked, what is the heritage or ancestry of your last name?
It is Russian or Belarusian, actually. I'm originally from Belarus, but the name is a combination of Belarusian and Polish.
Awesome. I don't see any other. Well, we just popped one in here from Daniel. What's the average price by square foot on a system installation?
So the installation will depend on how much labor you need to do the work. Obviously, systems that have cement or self-leveler involved with it will take longer and will have additional expenses than ones that are directly installed that are not embedded. The heating systems themselves can vary anywhere from $7 to $10 a square foot as they are right now. They could be a little bit more depending on how much simplicity they take away from the installation, or how much simplicity they add to the installation and how much additional engineering needs to go into those systems to allow them to do that. But it is a premium luxury that's definitely worth it for that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sergey. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar sponsored by ThermoSoft. If you have any other questions, please contact ThermoSoft with the information found on this screen that you're seeing right now. Once you leave... I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Sharon. I do want to address one comment that was made that I noticed, that the floor sensor is a FidBox unit. That was in the chat there. They are actually separate units. The FidBox is a data logger. The floor sensor will come with the thermostat that you order from the heating system manufacturer.
Thank you for that. I just saw another question here. I'm sorry, there's one more popped in. Hardwood floors can last centuries. What's the warranty on these systems right now?
Depending on the systems, they go from anywhere from 3 to 5 years all the way up to lifetime. So the matching of the system is as important for what you're looking to do with the system.
Okay. Now, once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we always appreciate your feedback, so please complete that survey. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. NWFA will continue to host free technical webinars on the second Wednesday of each month from 2 to 3 p.m. Central Time. Occasionally, we will host an extra webinar occurring on the fourth Wednesday of the month from 2 to 3 Central Time. So be sure to register for the next webinar on March 13th, presented by WOCA USA on the topic of water-based polyurethanes for wood flooring. So on behalf of NWFA, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all. Thank you, Sergey. Did a great job.
My pleasure. Quick question. What was our final tally of max attendees?
75 to 80.
Okay.